And welcome to another very special episode of the Two Fans Podcast. I'm your co-host, Joshua Ament.
And I'm your other co-host, Ari Jesselson.
And joining us today, our first guest on this podcast. We were supposed to have Jack Spirek on. Unfortunately, things happen, communications, and that ends up being moved. But in the meantime, we have a very good friend of ours, the great and powerful, and I may or may not be saying it because he's blackmailing me, Scott Eisele.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I've heard a lot about this podcast. I'm excited to talk to Josh and Ari about everything that's going on, whatever questions they have. Let's jump in, I guess.
Well, before we jump in, for the folks at home who surprisingly might not know you, can you just give us a brief introduction to Scott Eisele?
Oh, of course. Who wouldn't know me, though? So I go to the same school as Josh and Ari. If you guys don't know me, I play tennis. That's probably the reason to give some different perspective on sports. And I'm a senior. Nice.
So yeah, as Scott said, he's a tennis player for the LaFell School, the same high school as us. He's in the same grade, and just because we're in this whole COVID situation and that affected your tennis season, so when did you realize that COVID will cancel last year's season for you?
Yeah. Okay. So we'll go back. Wow, almost a year to March, right? March, I think 7th was when we shut down, right? I hate to say that I'm right a lot of the time, but I remember when this whole situation was popping up, I was like, oh, we're going into a deep clean. I think it's more than just a deep clean. I don't know if we're going to come back. That's tough. Maybe tennis will survive because it's a distance sport, and that always keeps it great. In this time, especially unlike basketball, other things. But, unfortunately, we couldn't come back to the school until, the next year. So when did it set in? It was a tough situation because I was really looking forward to 11th grade spring season sports because the whole year I was gaining a lot of momentum. I was in tournaments of my own outside of school, and I was really improving as a player, and that really interrupted that flow that I had.
Yeah, so of course, you think you kind of alluded to it. Of course, you're at least as far as the school. I know you mentioned you do some independent stuff, but the school, at least for boys tennis season, was of course supposed to start in the spring, and that obviously didn't happen. And how big would you say that, sort of in the grand scheme of things, did you think it would be at the start of it? And then going forward, do you think it was as big or not as big or even bigger a deal than you thought it was?
Yeah, that was devastating to me because I was really looking forward to it. I'm on the team with all my friends, and first of all, it's a social thing, but also I really wanted to prove myself this year because I had really been improving over the winter and over the previous fall. And I was actually really excited because I was probably going to get a really good single spot on the team. And, that ruined everything. It's unfortunate because the girls' tennis played that fall because there was no pandemic. And then I believe they played this fall as well. So it was interesting that they got to practice. And, we were shut out 2 years in a row. Or 1 year.
Yeah, all right. So I guess going sort of into that shutdown, I can tell you kind of just said like how rough that was. Were there sort of anything in particular, I don't know, be it some sort of like some other activity, I don't know, a group of friends, and I don't know, some reassuring quote or anything that made it a little bit easier? Or was it just kind of like toughing it out every single day?
Yeah, I would say it's toughing it out, but at the same time, having school, not to look forward to, of course, it's whatever because it's online, but it gave me something, some sort of purpose that I had to go to school, had to do the work, it was due at a certain point. It still felt like school because our school was so on top of it, and the online work, it was there. It didn't let up, but yeah, I spoke to my friends online, of course, all the time. Especially you, Josh, in Spanish. We had many projects together. It was an interesting time, but uh, it wasn't so enjoyable as it was just sort of toughing it out, like you said.
Because we were shut down, we were unable to go to school, making it harder to practice for tennis with all the courts there. So, were you able to practice your tennis skills off during the COVID? And if so, how?
That's a good question. So, what my sort of philosophy behind it was, you know what? There probably won't be many opportunities to practice like actual tennis because obviously, like the college where I live, Westchester Community College, it was closed. Where I normally play with some of my friends, and it's sort of what I tried to do was more in the fitness realm, and I would just run around my development, do exercises in my yard because the pandemic, when it really hit, it was in March, April, May, June, and in the warmer months. So I focused a lot on fitness, but as sort of July, August, September, I I signed up for a job at a camp where I was an assistant tennis instructor, and I practiced a lot with my friends. Social distance, of course, but tennis allows for that because it's a distance sport in and of itself, which is always good.
Yeah, I can certainly share that. I think one of the first times I actually had met up with an old friend who honestly I haven't really talked to a few years before then, but we met up and played tennis. So it's I guess I mean of course with the pandemic, and we all sort of shut ourselves inside for those first couple of months, but being able to, I mean, get back together, play a sport you love, that must have at least eased some of the pain.
Yeah, yeah, it felt like there was sort of I got a taste of freedom, if you know what I mean. It felt really good because it was warm and you know not that the pandemic was over because that obviously it gave us some hope that normal life was coming back. You could have fun experiences again, and a game like tennis allows for it. So why not practice what I love?
Yeah, and especially since a lot of us were cooped up inside, many of us would barely go outside. So it's just nice to be with your friends and do the stuff you love, kind of having that sense of um, going back to normal life, if you will.
Yeah, of course, nothing like normal life still, and we're in what, February, so but it did feel good during the summer, and hopefully, as the warmer months progress, we could see more of that because especially in the winter, we're cooped up even more in New York because we've got snow. It's cold, so you're not just outside, where you could have those experiences with friends like you would in the summer.
Yeah, and for anybody outside of New York, some of us have over 2.5 feet of snow this past week.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so obviously we're still in a pandemic, COVID is still around, and there's a lot of ways we had to adapt in many fields. Obviously, sports was one of them that had changed. A lot of people, like for the pros, they don't have fans, they have that whole bubble system. With high school sports, it's a little different. So, because I know a lot of them are being canceled, they don't even want to play. So, as a student athlete, do you think that COVID restrictions are too much for high school sports?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about it before, but I definitely see what schools are trying to avoid uh, with having the restrictions so tight. But you know, it really depends on which sport. Like tennis, I think that should definitely be allowed because if you do it in a safe manner, you're not touching the other person. Whereas in something like basketball, I could see where contact happens all the time. And it's it's very interesting from the mindset of, say, the principal, because you don't want the kids going home and giving it to someone else or a family member, but you do want the kids to be able to, live and have fun with their friends like they used to.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see where you're coming from. Of course, like from at least as a non-athlete myself, from a distance perspective, I can see and we can see from like people talking about of course, the pros in those early couple of months. It's like, oh well, obviously it's such a big risk for them to play, but when you really look at the sort of the insider's perspective here, just sort of the emotional toll that can take, and it gets also kind of toll in terms of the schedule. Like I know, um, I mean, a lot of people, including myself as a fan, kind of like know what time of year it is, kind of uh, by what's going on in the sports world. Like I know when Wimbledon
Right.
was canceled, like even me as just a casual tennis fan, like I'm used to seeing that like those July mornings,
Right.
Federer Djokovic matches. Uh, of course, that didn't happen in 2020, the French Open, which I never actually was really able to pinpoint when exactly it was pushed back to the fall the past year. So I guess I
Was
gotta ask you as a little as a truer tennis enthusiast, how did that schedule change? How did that kind of did that throw you off in any sense?
Of course it threw me off. When you're sitting there, when what Tennis Channel has to do is get interviews from former players or current players instead of live matches, and they have to show older matches because there's nothing going on. It's really frustrating as a fan because Wimbledon, the French Open, those are really entertaining times, and you're really, honestly, as a real tennis fan, you're really invested in it. You're looking at the draws, you're looking at, and tennis matches, they're all the time, especially in different time zones. So like currently in the Australian Open, which is happening right now, some matches may start at like 2 a.m. and I'll be up for it. And that's what I've been doing every year, because even though I may have schoolwork, it's definitely worth it. But with the pandemic and the shutdown and everything, it really messed that up. Even though it did help my sleep schedule, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and
I
I get.
really, yeah, I missed those Wimbledons, because 2019 was so amazing that that missing it in 2020 was definitely rough.
Yeah, and I get that also from a fan's perspective. For anything, the big like Wimbledon is kind of like the World Series for baseball or the Super Bowl for football, and all those sports do have their fans. So when something's canceled, something you're looking forward to, something you're anticipated for, it really bums you out that you won't have it. But as you said, sometimes you would stay up till 2 a.m. Even with schoolwork, that you know that you have schoolwork and you have school the next day, you'd still stay up.
Oh
So,
no, that's actually when the match would start.
oh,
if you
yeah,
if you if you get what I said, basically, like, because it's in Australia, which is such a time difference. So I know that when I wake up in the morning, it's their nighttime. So the match will start at, like, a daytime match will start, deep into the night. That's what I meant by that. It's
oh,
sad for
I
my sleep
totally,
schedule,
yeah, no,
but
I totally understand. I will definitely say when, of course, you had no baseball, no MLB until late July, but I was still when I heard ESPN was broadcasting baseball. Yes, it was in Korea. Yes, its game started at 5:30 in the morning, but I was there.
you gotta do what you gotta do. It's something you love.
yeah, and I get that. But I think you guys kind of need a little help, to be honest. Like, but I don't know how I feel
I
about that.
survived.
I
You know
mean,
what? I'll make it,
did
because
you?
you know what? I'm watching tennis, and that's all I want.
I got to give you respect for that. But like you said, you'd be up early, stay up late for all the stuff. And as a student, once again, you are a high school student athlete. So how was it like balancing, or how are you able to balance all your responsibilities?
Well, you mean pre-COVID or during the pandemic? Because during the pandemic, it was pretty asynchronous, even though you had to attend classes, but the work you could kind of do whenever you wanted, which was very nice.
Yeah, especially online. A lot of us could cheat, and there was a lot of ways to get around it. Hey, I'm not pretending that I'm getting to heaven. We're all going to hell. But
Yeah.
before COVID, all that stuff. But for balancing,
I hope everyone makes it to this point in the podcast.
we might have to censor the HEL part. But yeah, before COVID, being on the courts, practicing, doing the homework, having a social life, how are you able to balance that? And do you have any tips for the kids at home?
Well, look, I'm someone who's developed I don't know if it's a good or bad skill, but I can kind of go on autopilot and get no sleep if I want to. And whether that's a good or bad thing is up to you, but
as someone who can't, I would think that's a good thing.
Yeah, but honestly, what was I going to say? What would you ask? I'm sorry.
It's all good. How are you able to balance all your responsibilities, like being on the court, practice, schoolwork, social life?
Okay. Well, if you love doing something and you want to do it, you'll find a way. That's what I've always said. If you know that you want to, I don't know, in your schedule, put in some time for tennis practice or just some fitness or just doing something that or just even watching tennis, you know that you have to do your work or something before that, of course, or after during the night, and that's something you have to sacrifice. And if you can't, you can't. And you should focus on your schoolwork, especially in high school, because college opens up a lot of opportunities. If for some reason you didn't have the like it wasn't available to you, or I don't know, there are a lot of people who don't live near courts or something like that. But for a student, it is hard to balance, and I think that that's true with any other sport, and or just doing anything you love, because you just have to balance that time. And it took a lot of management, but the way I coped with it was just by doing work at like 3 a.m. And it's not a good thing, and it's not a good habit, but that's just how I dealt with it, because I may have prioritized tennis a little bit too much, or maybe not too much.
Yeah, if there's
I totally get it. People, I mean, even just as stressful as myself, will occasionally have to resort to that, but people cope with different things in different ways. And if that works for you, then who am I to judge?
I got through it. That's all I needed to do.
Yeah, if there's a will, there's a way. I was an actor in the high school. I was there for the Kobe moment. I think we all know that. But for some of these rehearsals, they would be 10 hours long, 12 hours long, and you have to push it. So you're going from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. sometimes just to run a show. So you just have to figure out that schedule and make it work.
Yeah, as someone who watched the show, it did seem like it took a lot of effort to put in, but I definitely was not going to be that person who came on Sunday for 12 hours during, when I could have just been sitting at home doing nothing.
Oh, I don't blame you at all, honestly. Yeah, and how did you get into tennis? Obviously, none of us are born with the passions. We didn't put our first step in the world and say, "Hey, I love tennis. I love acting. I love baseball. That stuff." So, how did you get into it, and who did you model your game after?
Okay. So I'll start with my background a little bit, because that's a good question. So as a kid, I started playing baseball, right? I also played tennis though. Like it was more rare, but my main thing was baseball for a long time. When I was about 13 or 14, I sort of had I had this sort of change in heart, and and I sort of stopped playing baseball. I was at a really, I wouldn't say really high level of baseball, but I was pretty good. I was a pitcher, so I was able to navigate the baseball diamond, if you know what I mean. Um, but I sort of found this sort of I didn't like being on a team because as a pitcher, you don't have as much you have control as a pitcher, but you have to rely on other people to win the game. And that's what I kind of didn't like. I liked the individual responsibility of tennis and everything that tennis has to offer. Because if you want to put in the work to be a good player, more athletic, then you'll probably see more benefits. But at the same time, you won't have to watch other people make a ground ball error or something. And that's why I gravitated toward tennis. And I think that's the main reason. I don't like other people being in charge of other things. And maybe that doesn't apply in all areas of life, but that's what I liked about the sport. Now, in the beginning, or sorry, I'm going to go back to like when I was 16 years old, I guess I started to really enjoy professional tennis, and I would, as if it were like a religion, like you guys watch your respective sports and track your respective players in, I guess, the NBA, the NFL, and I would do the same. During school, I would just watch matches if I had time. That's just how it was. And then when I was, I guess, 17, yeah, no, sorry. Like last year when I was 16, I know I don't have such a long life to go back to, but, I sort of made this push. Like I wanted to become, not, obviously it's not feasible sometimes, but I really wanted to get into a more competitive style and get into more match play in a real environment with other people from, around New York. And I played in the Bronx for a while. And that's just how it was. That's how I got into it. Of course, I have my favorite players, and everyone has their favorite players. But the person who I modeled my game after was Stan Wawrinka, who is, I think, seated like number 17 right now. But the sort of the thing that drove me toward his game was he sort of looked like me. He had he has a one-handed backhand just like I do, and I really model. I love watching him play, and it's very sad because last night at like 3 a.m. I was watching his match in the Australian Open, and he was down 2-0. He came back all the way to 2-all in the fifth set, and in the Australian Open there's a fifth set super tiebreak, which is the first to 10 points, or not first to 10 points, you have to win by 2, but he had 3 match points and he was going to almost pull it all the way back, but his opponent managed to take the win. And it was really sad because he's 35 years old, and we might not be able. He's won 3 Slam championships before. He's won at the U.S. Open, Roland Garros, which is the French Open, and he's won at the Australian Open before. And it was sad because as a 35-year-old, you have a limited time on the tennis court because it's such a physical game, and we might never be able to see him in his prime again because he's underwent a couple knee surgeries, and it's tough because he's my favorite player, but you got to take the positives from your game.
Exactly, and everything does come to an end. Going back to what you said about having team sports, I kind of agree on you. Some of my favorite sports to play, like football and baseball. But when I was in baseball middle school, I was a third baseman, and there was always that one kid who would never throw the ball. He was a shortstop. So every time he had the ball, he would run to the bases to try to get the person out instead of throwing to the teammates. Yeah. So I knew that one kid also. And
I guess I'm sort of the lone wolf here. Kind of where I do like those. I mean, those baseball, football, sort of more team heavy sports where sort of everyone on the team sort of is able to know their role, focus on their one job. But that's just me, and people will disagree.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from because sometimes the highs are even higher and the lows, I guess, maybe they're less low, if you know what I mean, because you have to take in tennis, you have to take full responsibility for why you lost a match, and sometimes you don't even understand. Maybe it's a better opponent, but in baseball, if your team's rallying together, I know that feeling. I know that feeling if you're all excited, someone's batting, and there's a rally and it's like 2 outs or something. Who knows? But maybe if it's the end of the game and everyone gets excited, you think you have a chance to get back in the game, and everyone, it's fun. It's fun. And then after the game, you have like people to rejoice with. And when in tennis, it's just you. But that's just how it is.
Yeah, and I get
People,
that.
yeah.
Sorry, cut you off. Yeah, I get that.
No.
But also, like you said, it's better to be with a team, be people around you who also love what they're doing. But going off what Josh said, sometimes when you are part of the team, they might forget about you. They might try to think they're better than you. And also, what's it called? Yeah, they just might. It's more when you're playing solo like tennis. It's who you are. You can't blame on anyone besides yourself. There's no excuse. There's no scapegoat. So the only way to get better is by you getting better. You can't have something like baseball where the pitcher is bad and say, "Oh, we need a new pitcher." If that makes sense.
Yeah. I agree with that. With that whole team aspect, that yeah, it could sometimes be somewhat to blame, and I think that's one thing that I've tried. I've in my own life, I've tried over the past year. I've just in general, I've tried not to blame other people for my mistakes and try to take more responsibility. And it's just in the name of the game of tennis. It's just because it's a solo sport. Yes, you can have doubles, of course, but who's watching competitive doubles? Yes, it's always there, but and sometimes it has like great highlights, but it's not the focal point. Either way, it's still two players. So and you got to take care of your own. You know, you're still half the team. When in baseball, you could be 1 out of 15.
Yeah, I think you were also half the team in that Spanish project. But I digress.
Josh.
Oh, is Josh throwing some shade?
But I digress. All right, let's here's something interesting. So I guess you kind of said it, I don't know how long ago, but sort of where tennis hasn't exactly been a long running thing for you, but it's certainly been a big thing for you. So I guess if you could sort of go back in time, I don't know, maybe when you were like 10, 12, maybe younger, I don't know, whenever you want, but what would you tell your younger self? Be it about tennis, be it about life.
Okay, so this is gonna sound weird, but when I was 8 years old, I made a USTA account with my mom, and and yeah, it wasn't used, but last year or a year and a half ago, I guess, I was I was registering for the USTA, and I needed my number, and I didn't know I had it, but then I realized I made it 12 years ago, or not 12 years, whatever number of years ago. But um, what I would tell myself is that it's okay that I didn't realize what I really wanted to do for a while, because I think the way it came naturally was the best possible way. Yeah, I wish I could have. You know what? Because some players, their background is tennis, and maybe their parents force them to play because that's what they want them to do. They want them to be successful athletes in tennis, and maybe the kid doesn't want to, but he sees himself at this really competitive level and a high level, and just continues, but doesn't really enjoy it as much as they could. But I think because I love it so much, I think it's more natural, and I'm glad that it happened that way rather than being forced or anything. I wouldn't tell myself anything if I went back. Maybe just to keep going with what I love, honestly, because I wouldn't have told myself just to switch to tennis because it's not what I loved at the time. Yeah, maybe I wish, because now if I continued with it, I would have been, vastly superior than I am now, but you know.
Everything happens for a reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So, are you planning to continue tennis in college? And is there a dream for you to go pro?
The dream to go pro. There's certainly a dream, if you get what I mean. You know, um, there's a player who's my age, Carlos Alcaraz. He's in the second round of the Australian Open. I'm definitely not that level, um, but you know, in college, I definitely hope to. I hope I can make the team. If not, I hope I could find someone crazy enough as me so that they could practice with me at weird hours. That's just kind of what I'm hoping because I want to play, and if I could find someone crazy enough to practice with me, then you know that would be a definite win.
Yeah, no, I definitely get with man with the weird hours again. I kind of said earlier, yeah, we're few and far between. We're represented here.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
man, I also totally get the. I mean, I actually can't really say that I totally get, but I just know like when I saw was it a couple of years ago now in the when I see like Coco Gauff in the U.S. Open, and she was like what, only 15
Yeah.
when she was first there. That like made me feel like, man, what am I doing with my life?
Yes, you're right. While it is easier to do it in the women's draw, vastly easier. And I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying that it's you know the men's game is a little bit more physically demanding, if you know what I mean. But it was crazy that she was 15 years old and she was able to beat Venus Williams, who was is regarded as one of the best.
Yeah, and you said you do want to pursue tennis in college, and if that's something that you believe in. Do you believe that NCAA students who are athletes should get paid for what they do, or should be able to take endorsement deals and stuff like that?
Okay, it's a good question. What I think is that if it's from a third party and like some endorsement deal, I think totally yes, they should definitely be paid. Because if some company sees talent and wants to sponsor them, that's their move. But I don't think the actual school should pay them in any way. It definitely depends on the sport because if you want to get as many people watching college tennis as there are college football, then there just isn't the market for that, and they should not be paid like it's just because if you think of I guess the top earning NFL guys like Tom Brady or something. I don't know the top earners, but I'm sure you guys do. But they're I guess really valued by their teams. They're valued by the viewers. They're valued by their sponsors, and that's why they get paid so much. It's not so much for what they actually do that's impressive on the like actually on the field. It's for sponsors just wanting their sponsorships and to beat out other companies. But in I guess college tennis, you don't really have that competition at such a high level. It's there, but it's not like the viewers aren't there. That's the only thing. It's not as big.
All right, yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from. Would probably disagree a little bit in terms of where sort of NCAA as a whole with making a whole lot of money. I'm sure they could find a way to share that wealth. But
Yeah,
as far
yeah.
as yes,
It's
as
yeah. When they hold all that money, it's not good. I think the
yeah.
players should get some. I don't know what it would. I don't know what form it would look like, but you know, you need the players to get something.
No, but with that being said, I do understand your sort of point, and as I kind of alluded to earlier in the week when we were talking about NCAA football and would the college football players be compensated? One of the big things I pointed to was Yeah, because they attract such a big market for college football
Right.
that unfortunately you don't necessarily have with college tennis.
Yeah, I think and the sort of the pay thing is a relevant issue in tennis because I believe there's a video that explains it much better than I will, but the basically the top earners of tennis, the top 50 players will make, and I mean not even in the top 50, but I mean the top 10 will make an insane amount of money. Top 3 honestly will make an insane amount of money, and people below top 100, it will be very difficult for them to fly and enter the tournaments where they can actually get better and and make the money. It's a very difficult thing to navigate, and there have been efforts made by someone like a Novak Djokovic who's been on the side of the players who have gotten like the Australian Open to have more money allocated to people who win the first round rather than, and it's taken out of the final prize, like and in the lower rounds it'll have more pay because the players down there will need it. Traveling across the world is difficult for someone who's losing in the first few rounds because they just aren't as good as the top players.
Yeah. So, obviously, as we all know, for those who's been a part of anything that involves multiple people, either a work, sport, club, anything, there's always going to be some great stories that are told. There's always going to be great moments, some moments that last forever. Are you willing to tell some of your favorite locker room stories?
Locker room stories. Okay. Well, it's interesting because the tennis locker room consists of you and maybe the other player, and you're probably not talking to the other player. So they're few and far between. I'm just going to leave it at that because it doesn't exist as it would in baseball or football or something or basketball because honestly, a lot of the preparation that happens, and for me, a lot of the places I play, you don't go into a locker room. Is what I'm saying. It's you arrive there and you sit and wait for the other person, and then the USTA guy that's there will just start officiating the match. And it's not like locker rooms aren't really a thing in tennis because you don't need lockers. You just bring your stuff in a bag, and that
All right,
goes
let me.
for
All
very
right,
high
no,
levels as well.
I'm not going to let you off that easy. Let me change it up a little bit. See if
Okay,
this sparks a
okay.
different reaction. You have a favorite story from any sort of team practice?
Well, I mean, at school, notably, when Braden was there, and it was a fun time. But practice, honestly, um, with my friends, it'll just consist of the usual banter. That's it. It I don't know what kind of stories you're looking for, but do you have
I
any
mean, we do
stories
love
of
the banter.
your? We do love to banter, and sometimes it's underrated. But the thing about banter is that you don't really remember much of it because it's just banter. It's not like a memorable story. So,
Totally understandable.
but yeah, there have been times where I've been sort of outraged because of someone who I know is making the wrong call and is just being annoying about it. Because that's basically when they say like college tennis, it's like that's a college tennis moment. It's like when someone makes the call that's obviously one way, but just because it's close, they give it to themselves. It's sort of like that. You'll get annoyed on court. I personally, I'm not a racket smasher because I don't have that kind of money to just replace them. But I have smashed other things. Like I'll bring a stick to snap or something. Just it can be infuriating sometimes, but you get past it.
I'd never actually thought of that, but
Yeah, the
that's some
on-court
smart
rage
thinking.
moments, the on-court rage moments. You can see a lot of top players doing it because they have rackets galore. But that's something to look up. But yes, there are some times where I would have loved to, but I'm not gonna do that. I can contain myself enough.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I completely understand what you're saying, and obviously there are times where you just want to throw something at the wall. So
Yeah.
Josh, don't look at us like that. You know exactly what we're talking about.
Oh no, I know. You are talking to a guy who has done some things.
Oh, can you give us an example?
So scandalous.
Yes, I can. But let's move
Mysterious
on
and
to
scandalous. Well,
the.
I
one
wasn't
final
really asking if you could. It was that you would.
Yes, but you
I'm not
asked
gonna
if
let
I
you
could, and I
slide.
said yes, I could. But let's move on.
But would.
But let's move on
Okay.
to I think what might be the last question right here, which is what motivates you to train?
What motivates me? Well, see, I don't think about sort of the known fact that it is a real stretch to think that I at any point will become um, a legendary figure in the sport of tennis. But of course, I would love to, and my just general enjoyment of the sport, not just at a viewing level, but because at an actual competitive level, and I think because I love it so much is the way I watch it so much, which then motivates me to want to play it more. And I think that just watching the Australian Open, it basically it puts sort of a seed in my mind that if I was there, it would be such an incredible, um, I guess, moment for myself, and it would just be awesome to be there. And things like if you in the U.S. Open back in the day, I would go back in the day, like a year or two ago. Obviously not in 2020, but the qualifier rounds, which are basically they're the seeded players, and then there are the qualifier rounds that determine who is going to get into the main draw of the tournament, and you have to win basically 3 matches um, to get past the qualifier rounds into the main draw, and those are free to go to. So a lot of people don't do it, but with my friends, I would just go to like qualifier rounds in the U.S. Open and just watch, I guess, underrated players or players that have fallen off, and I get to see them play, and it's free, and it's it's nice. It's very nice because it's something people don't take advantage of enough. And also, you could go to the practice courts for free, where you'll see big names.
So, is there any last words you'd like to give?
My last words is that, okay, this is going to sound really, I don't know, sort of cheesy, but I really, and I see where it comes from, but the stereotype that that tennis is sort of like an old white rich man sport, I people who are not into tennis will think that, and it's such a shame because it's an incredible sport, I think, and it's I believe the fourth most popular sport in the world, and it's so global and interconnected and I think it's underrated.
At this point, we went into a 20-minute tangent where I tried to get an outro, and there was lots of chaos, lots of interruptions. So if I seem exasperated with Ari and Scott at this point, now you know why. I don't know how many times I've been interrupted from making the outro here, but Scott is forcing me to leave in that he has some socials he wants to plug. He's pointing down. so that of course, they're going to be in the description. So click on those if you're interested. With that being said, today, more than any other day, thank you so much for listening and for bearing with us, just as I bore with them. But we do this every single day, Monday through Thursdays at 4 p.m. I know Ari said yesterday it's a varying times. We try to get them out at 4 p.m. Today, maybe not, because it's already a little bit past when we end recordings. But with all that being said, until next time, we will talk to you then.